Hello lovely people and welcome back to this week's new video. Kind of shook because I haven't done a sit down video in such a long time, but I wanted to do my October wrap up, try something new. If you're new here, hello, my name is Noah. I'm a bookish and lifestyle vlogger born and raised and still based in New York City. So if that sounds like of any interest to you, I would absolutely love it if you would stick around till the end and subscribe. So I should know how many books I read. I believe it's like 10 because I'm still reading my current book, which I obviously cannot rate. It's actually 11 books. The current book that I'm reading is called A Faint Cold Fear by Karin. This is the third book in the Grant County series. I'm almost done with it. I don't have too long, but unfortunately I can't really give my full thoughts about this book just yet. I won't be including this in my October wrap up, but I will be giving it a little bit of an honorable mention. There's like construction going on, so trying to work my way through that noise. So annoying. So the way that I'll be moving through this wrap up will be by my ranking of these from 1 star to 5 stars, or actually no rating. I have one for a book. Let's just get started. My first book is called Kismat Connections by Ananya, Devarajan, and I listened to this via audio during my 48-hour readathon to catch up on my Goodreads goal. I kind of timed this really badly of when I wanted to start it. I wanted to be able to multitask, and usually I can do that. I like to clean or go out on walks while listening to an audiobook, but this one I was like talking to people because I was having the sales associates help me in finding my size, in finding right products. Like at Sephora, it's already quite loud in there. When I was in Reformation, it was fine because it was very quiet, there weren't a lot of people, and for a lot of the time I was in the dressing room alone. But anyway, this book is, like I said, a romance. Madhuri has been told that her senior year of high school is going to be an absolute failure in all aspects from her astrology-loving mother. But Madhuri is sort of this perfect student and she can't accept that, so she devises an experimental relationship with her childhood best friend Arjun in order to prove this wrong and to prove that she has her own free will. But she didn't factor in that Arjun, like he has feelings and that he actually has a crush on her that she had no idea about. And when she starts to develop her own feelings, Madhuri has to decide between creating her own destiny and breaking Arjun's heart. Because I was listening to this via audio, I was not really paying attention because so many things were happening, and I just felt too bad giving this a rating because my mind was going in and out. This book was not getting my full attention. I did finish it and I did count it because I was sort of paying attention, but I also just felt like the first part of when I was actually paying attention, it just wasn't really capturing me, and that's why I eventually stopped paying attention and didn't bother to pause it. So unfortunately this book didn't get a rating, but it is counting towards my Goodreads goal because your girl is behind. Now moving on to the 2 stars, I only have one book and it's also another audiobook. This is Cold by Mariko Tamaki, another YA story. This one is sort of a mystery. Todd is dead, and now in his ghost form we're following him as he watches the detectives investigate his death. He starts to think about the choices that he made that led him to his death. Being told into a perspective, we're also following Georgia, who doesn't know Todd at all. He went to the brother school because she went to an all-girls school and he went to an all-boys academy. Since hearing about his death, she can't seem to stop herself from thinking about him, and it might be because of the similarities in personality that they had, that they're both queer, or because of the stories that she hears about him just seem all really fake and overtold. Then she starts to realize that she might have actually met Todd before. She might have seen him somewhere before where he wasn't supposed to be. This is supposed to be sort of mystery, and I found Todd's point of view to be absolutely pointless and boring. It was just a way to look into other people's minds and to sort of add a little bit more context to the story that I didn't think was really necessary, because there are people in George's life who could also provide that point of view. Overall, like I said, I gave it 2 stars because I just it wasn't giving. It was also a really short book, and with this being I think the 3rd or 4th book that I've read by this author and none of them have been higher than 3 stars, I think I'm not really into this author. I think their writing style just does not mesh with me. It's very melancholic and kind of honestly monotone. Moving on to the 3 stars, I have a graphic novel called Umma's Table by Yeon-Sik and it's translated by Janet Hong. Madang moves to the countryside with his wife and his new baby, and he's really excited to start this new chapter in his life with his growing family. But he is kind of brought back to reality when he has to split his time between the countryside with his family, but also back to Seoul to his impoverished, ailing parents, to take care of them, to take them to the hospital to get checkups. And it's bringing up a lot of of stress in him because he wants to be able to take care of his parents, but he doesn't quite want to bring those two worlds together and have his parents live with him, and he wants to keep them quite separate. In order to cope with that stress, he starts to reminisce about family meals they've spent together, and especially his mother's cooking, especially his mother's kimchi that she spent months fermenting. And I definitely believe like food stores a lot of memories. He is trying to remind himself that with that there are good memories with his family, with his parents, that it might not be such a bad thing, and he starts to like feel bad about not being able to fully take care of them. I definitely understand the feeling of like not quite burdened, but like burdened with maybe the guilt of not being able to give your parents back the same care that they gave you, because depending on your situation and your new family, I guess that could be really hard, especially when you're spending time with them as well as a young baby that you're really excited for, you know, and the baby's also going to take up a lot of your time. It also reminded me a lot about health and taking care of your body while you're young in order to be healthy as you're older. It showed a lot about the impoverished side of Seoul and how because his parents lived in a basement unit, they weren't like getting a lot of vitamin D. There's also like a lot of bugs, and just the air quality was not really good for them. Overall, just a little bit sad, but I liked that he was able to like ground himself in like cooking, and he had created his own garden and was like cooking for his family and just like really reminding himself of the good parts. My next 3-star was We Don't Swim Here by Vincent Tirado, which was also a YA book. I seem to have read a lot of YA this month, which I don't typically do. This one was categorized as a horror or mystery. Bronwyn and her family moved to Hillwoods for a year because her grandmother is not doing very well. They are all moving back to her father's hometown to get her affairs in order. But Bronwyn understandably hates it there because her grandmother A is dying, and B actually, nobody seems to want to be friends with her. She's having a tough time in school. C, she is unable to swim. She's like on track to be this Olympic star, and she's unable to do that because people are giving her this weird warning that people don't swim there. This book is also told in dual perspective, so we're following her cousin Anais, who's trying to protect Bronwyn because the less interest that she takes in Hillwoods, the less interest Hillwoods will take in Bronwyn. She really wants Bronwyn to stop asking questions because it's making people really uncomfortable, and it's making her put a target on her back. Bronwyn doesn't really seem to understand that the town's warnings and that the lore related to that are actually real, because the living aren't the only one who seek retribution. With this being YA, I was really wondering how scary it could possibly be as a horror. I don't think I've really read YA horror before, and I was right because I did not find this to be creepy. The mystery really grabbed me in the beginning, but overall as the story went on, I just wasn't really seeing it, and eventually the horror aspect was kind of like, I felt like it was just a little bit sprinkled in there. Maybe because I was already losing interest at that point, it wasn't really horror to me. It seemed kind of like an afterthought that was added. Also, Bronwyn and Anais's perspectives, even though it was told in dual POV, I felt like their voice was very similar, and I wasn't really able to differentiate whose chapters I was reading. I had to flip back to see who was actually talking. That kind of made it difficult and also not as fun. Maybe it's just the dual POV thing that wasn't really working for me. Moving on to books that were 3.5 stars, I had Kisscut by Karin, which is the second book in the Grant County series, and this is most definitely an adult mystery thriller. It's the first book in the Grant County series I read last month, and it's the first ever book that Karin has ever written. She is like a thriller superstar. She like puts out a book every year, so it was really cool to see her growth also in writing because I've read her later books. This is also a standalone series, but it does follow the same 3 characters. It's going to be Dr. Sarah Linton, Chief of Police Jeffrey Tolliver, and Detective Lena Adams. It's a typical Saturday night. People are having fun at the town skate rink until there is a deadly shootout involving minors. Sarah is the town pediatrician and also the medical examiner, and she has this complicated relationship with the chief of police as he is her ex. They might be rekindling their love or whatever, but in this case, during the autopsy of the child who ends up dying, or killed actually, is long-term abuse and also self-mutilation. The autopsy just brings up a lot more questions that are unanswered, and they find, like, through asking questions like no one wants to answer, that there might actually be a bigger conspiracy at play here. And when another girl is abducted related to this crime, they find that it might lead to something something more national. Truly awful because it involves children. Lena in this, I felt like her part was a little bit smaller, but she's also connecting with one of the victims in this weird, creepy way. It also has to do with like what she dealt with in the first book. There's a lot of trigger warnings, obviously, through not just this book, but a lot of Karin Slaughter's books. I did enjoy it more than the first book. I feel like we're getting to know the characters a little bit more, and also it's hard kind of rating something with such a brutal topic because Karin Slaughter's known for being really, really hard hitting in her books and also just like writing about really brutal topics. So it's like weird to want to rate this book a little bit higher, but I do really enjoy Karin Slaughter's writing, and I think she does an amazing job in writing thrillers and keeping you on your toes. I'm really sorry if you can hear that. So far, as you can tell, I'm obviously enjoying the series because I'm reading the third one. I think there's only 7 books in the series too. I think that she writes crime really well, and also having a medical examiner and the detective aspect, I really enjoy having both of those. I know people don't really like the police POV books, but I kind of like seeing how they solve the crime. Next up was a horror book that I own this time. I borrow a lot of my books from the library, and it's The Deep by Nick Cutter. In this one, a plague called the Gets is taking over the world, and there is no cure. The Gets makes people forget. In the end, their body forgets how to function involuntarily, and there's also no cure. But then deep into the Pacific Ocean, an unknown substance that the scientists have named ambrosia has been discovered, and it is possibly a universal cure and known as like a universal healer. In order to study this supposed cure, a research lab is created 8 miles beneath the Pacific to look into how this can help cure the Gets. But when the research lab goes incommunicado one day, the rescue team goes down to discover the mysteries of what's going on and what happened to the scientists down on there. So our main character, I would say, is named Luke. His brother is one of the scientists down there, and him and his brother have a really complicated relationship. He's also just like a family member. I'm not sure why he was the one that had to be down there, but this book is definitely very atmospheric, very creepy. The Troop is the only other book by Nick Cutter that I've read. My very first introduction to horror, and boy was that an introduction. I will say I couldn't help but really compare the 2 books together because it starts out the same type of way of how there's this plague and blah blah blah. So I will say that I enjoyed The Troop more because this was only 3.5 stars and I gave Troop 4.55 stars. This was very atmospheric, and it definitely makes you feel like you're losing your mind alongside the characters in this book, but something about it was missing and I couldn't really put my tongue to it, but I think a lot of it had to do with having compared the 2 stories, and maybe that's why. I still would like to check out other horror books. If you have any recommendations of 5-star books that you've read or any of your favorite Nick Cutter ones specifically, I would definitely like to know. Now moving on to books that were 4 stars. The first one is another one that I own physically, and it's The Quiet Tenant by Clémence Michelon. This is an arc actually that came out in June that I finally got to, and I'm very glad that I did. This one is also a thriller. It's told in 3 different perspectives. Aiden Thomas is this really nice, kind, stand-up guy living in the small town in New York, and he is quiet but always willing to help people out in his town. But what they don't know is that Aiden abducts and kills women, and he is a serial killer. He has killed 8 women before, and the 9th woman is held captive in his backyard shed. When his wife dies and he becomes a single father, he's forced to move and take Rachel along with him. He is also now forced to introduce Rachel, his captive, who he believes is brainwashed, to his tween daughter Celia as a family friend who just needs a place to stay. As they're living there in this creepy, messed up life, he meets this woman, Emily. Her name's Emily, right? And she is getting really close to Aiden in like a romantic way. So this book is being told in the perspective of Miss Rachel, his daughter Celia, and the love interest Emily. And it's so weird. Also very cool because each woman has a different look on Aiden as a person, as he is her captor, as he is the father, also as a lover. This was such a good time. It really keeps you on your toes because you're seeing how psychotic this man is, but also how capable he is of loving his daughter and this other woman, and it's just so insane to me, and it was such a roller coaster of emotions, but overall really enjoyed this. it. My next book was The Alice Network by Quinn, which was my first historical fiction in a long time. This is following women's involvement and their efforts, their heroic efforts in the war. I think specifically World War I. So this book is also told in dual perspectives, and it's following Eve during World War I, 1915-ish, her time as a spy. The next perspective, Charlie, is told a little bit in the future in 1947, and she is looking for her cousin Rose. After the war, they lost contact, and she didn't get any sort of like legitimate hardcore confirmation that her cousin was dead, and she wanted to go look for her to see for herself if her cousin was still out there. They were childhood best friends, and she really needs to know for closure. She stumbles on Eve, who can help her, but Eve is now this grumpy old lady. She has her own like revenge that she's looking for. They're also now brought together to look for her cousin Rose. I loved that this book was rooted in truth, well obviously as historical fiction, but some of the characters in the book are based off of real life people and their real life efforts that they made and sacrifices that they made for their country, and it was so cool. It just made me love women so much. It also just made me love historical fiction again so much, and I definitely will be checking out other books by Quinn, because in the copy that I was reading, this gorgeous floppy copy from the library had an excerpt from her other book, The Rose Code, and I already like ate that up right away. I sometimes felt like Charlie's side was kind of dragging because she's just this rich girl from America who comes over to England to look for her family, and she is very obviously privileged. She has worked for herself and she's a very smart girl, but in other ways that she's still very privileged. Obviously the spy parts are going to be a lot more interesting. I also felt like the third character in this, Finn, who is the Scottish man, was a little bit too stereotypical Scottish for me. Like the way that he acted or also just talked seemed kind of fake to me, but you could tell how well researched this book was, and I really liked it. I read another graphic novel called My Only Child by Wang Ning, sort of like a bind up of 4 different stories about China's one-child policy. It told different stories of in ways in which that you could lose your child and how difficult it is, especially because there is only one. Even though the author was going to be the same for all 4 stories, the artist was different, and so it really felt like a completely different story, even though it obviously was because the plots were different. But I liked the different art styles. It was really a sad book overall because you're seeing the really real possible ways in which that people lose their children. They're really heartbreaking, and I'm sure especially for parents who might be reading it, it would be just imagining how people's experiences could differ. I thought it was a really cool concept with it being 4 different stories and 4 different artists. Next is Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado, which was 4.5 stars. I had a really great time with this one as well. This one is YA, and Charlie is fat and she wants to be known for more than that because that's what all people see in her. She's also like the quiet best friend of like this gorgeous girl who absolutely is her ride or die, but she feels always second best to her. She feels that people don't really see how funny she is, how smart she is, how talented she is, and she wants to show people that she is so much more than just being fat, and that fat is not a bad thing. In comes also Brian, the new boy that she has a crush on, and it seems to be going really well until she finds out that Brian had previously asked out her best friend before. She's just back in that state of feeling really insecure and sad, but it's a really wonderful coming of age story. I love Charlie so much. I related to her in a lot of ways in terms of like always feeling second best or like you're not enough and that people aren't really seeing you for who you are. I loved her voice in this story so much. I also love her relationship with her best friend Amelia a lot. You can tell that they're really ride or dies. You can really see like the conflict that you go in through high school. She's also just this really hardworking girl, and I think Brian is so sweet also. The third act breakup part just felt a little bit typical, but it's also like high school, so I see why she needed that. I really love seeing coming of age stories and seeing their personal growth. It's a really good feel-good story. The only thing I wish had been different was like how her relationship with her mother resolved, because her mother also used to be fat and she lost a lot of weight, and now she's like super skinny and is trying to diet all the time and pushing all of these unhealthy meal replacement shakes on Charlie, and really honestly like fat shames her daughter, and I didn't feel like that part was resolved at all, and it was only touched upon lightly. I didn't like that. Overall, what I took away from this was that I love Charlie and that I really enjoyed Kristen Maldonado's writing style, and I would 100% be checking out another book by her. I have one out from the library already that I just need to get to. Last book that I had for this was my only 5-star read, and this was Hollow by Shannon Waters, Brandon Boyer White, and illustrated by Berenice Nelle. This is a graphic novel. It's paranormal and very Halloween themed. Izzy just moved to a new town, Sleepy Hollow, that is very Halloween obsessed because of the history that they have had in their town. In this town, the ghost stories are actually real, and during Halloween, the ghosts are out to play. We're also following the town's teen royalty, Vicky Van Tassel, who comes from a family that is very well known, has had a very important part in this town. There is a legend or rumor, I guess, that the Van Tassel family or this town also is being haunted by the Headless Huntsman, and they only have Halloween to break this scary ritual. It's kind of like their adventure on saving this town. I thought it was just a really cute story. I loved the art style. It was also very perfect for Halloween. Overall, it was just this feel-good story about also friendship, a little bit of love, and just their teamwork, and I just had a really good time with it. That's all I can say of why it was 5 stars. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know which books were 5 stars for you. I'm really excited for what books I'm going to be reading in November, and I will see you all in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.